cálmate, de pronto vas a nacer. Amado, ¿dónde voy? Siento frío o miedo. Esta noche cruzaremos y de pronto vas a saber, porque yo le pedí a la Virgen que llegue con bien un hogar que dejé, una vida que no te daré. ¡Ay, Dios!
Our opening song was Su Testimonio by the Los Angeles band Regime Noir. The lead singer, Israel Ramirez, a Gaslit Nation listener and an old friend from college, submitted this statement. Testimonio was written in honor of my mom and her story of crossing the border with her 5 children while pregnant with me. It is a song sung in Spanish, and it starts as a conversation between her and I in the womb. It talks about what I imagine were feelings of fear and anxiety of leaving her home in Mexico and taking such a dangerous journey. I believe this experience left an imprint on my developing self. Even though it was written many years ago, it is still applicable and relevant to today's anti-immigrant climate. One line in the song states, "To love is to know that my children won't suffer my thirst." I believe this in some way drives the immigrants' desire to leave the native land they cherish and love. It by no means is an easy decision. Such desperate yearning is sometimes forgotten while we debate the topic of immigration. The media tends to falsely label the immigrant as a hostile invader rather than focus on the individual human story. We all came from somewhere, and we all deserve a chance at happiness. That was one of the most profound statements that anyone has ever shared or said on the show. Everyone can hear the full song of Testimonio at the end of the episode by Regime Noir. Thank you so much, Israel. We're thinking of you, your family, and all the brave people standing up to Trump and Stephen Miller's crimes against humanity, kidnapping people without due process, and targeting protesters and journalists with violence. To hear more of Regime Noir's powerful music, we'll link to their songs in this week's show notes. And if you have music that captures the mood of this country, our hopes, our rage, our resilience, submit your songs using the link in the show notes. We always love hearing from you. We need our artists now more than ever. You are the defiant light that helps heal us all. We'll dive deeper into Trump's militarized crackdowns in this week's bonus show, out Thursday for our Patreon supporters. Sign up at patreon.com/gaslit. Discounted annual memberships are available, and you can also give the gift of membership along with other fun perks. Join us this Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern for the Gaslit Nation Salon, where we'll be joined by Gabe Garbowit and Kira Havens of Citizens Impeachment. We'll discuss how to hold this lawless convicted felon accountable and why a third impeachment of Felon 47 matters. Look for the Zoom link on Patreon. I want to warn everyone, this is the calm before the storm. Trump and Stephen Miller are just getting started. Their concentration camp bill is now moving through Congress, allocating a staggering $160 billion to expand state terror and intensify their anti-immigrant crackdown. That includes $8 billion for ICE personnel, $15 billion for deportations, and $45 billion for building new detention facilities, otherwise known as concentration camps. For context, ICE's current budget is around $8 billion. Trump's big, dangerous bill would increase ICE's power 20-fold. It's an unprecedented escalation of state terror under a lawless, convicted felon. Trump's big, ugly bill, Trump's concentration camp bill, is how MAGA plans to stay in power. If you think things are bad now, they're preparing to take it to a whole new level. Our time is running out to stop the worst from happening. Show up this Saturday, June 14, Felon 47's birthday, for the No Kings March protest. Go to nokings.org to find a march near you or start one. If there's not a march near you, we all need to show up because marching matters. Spread courage to reject their fear. Call Republican offices. Protest outside Republican offices. We cannot let them drag this country past the point of no return. And if you're looking for more ways to take action, stay tuned through the end of this episode where we'll share the newly updated Gaslit Nation Action Guide tailored for the fight we face right now. To introduce this week's guest, we're going to start with a disturbing Fox News interview Trump gave shortly before Putin's invasion of Ukraine all the way back in 2014. We played this on a very early episode of Gaslit Nation. As you'll hear, Trump spreads Kremlin propaganda and outlines his vision for America, a vision that tragically is now becoming reality. Trump laid it all out there, and still people refuse to believe him. So believe him now. Trump's big, ugly bill, Trump's concentration camp bill. Trump has sinister plans for all of us, and our time is running out to stop him.
Say they're Democrats, fine. You don't have to work. We're going to have a system that supports you to not even work anymore. Republicans have to have an uphill slog on this too, right?
Well, Clayton, it is tough for the Republicans, I think, because a lot of people are in this category. You're talking about a big category, and if anybody comes out against it, or if anybody goes against the new Democratic line and stuff, they're going to be. It's going to be hard in certain areas. Now, you know what solves it? When the economy crashes, when the country goes to total hell, and everything is a disaster, then you'll have you'll have riots to go back to where we used to be when we were great. I think we should give the Russians a little bit of leeway here. They spent all of this money, and I think we should not be knocking them at this point. Then we wonder why they don't like us and why they're eating our lunch in every country that we're dealing with against them. I really think we should say, hey, look, they're really out there doing a job. I mean, every time I turn on television, we're showing about a guy knocking down a door because his door lock didn't work. We're showing all of these things. And I will tell you something. If I'm Putin, I'm not happy about it. And I know for a fact he's not happy about it. When I went to Russia with the Miss Universe pageant, he contacted me and was so nice. And, the Russian people were so fantastic to us. I just say this. They're outsmarting us at many turns, as we all understand. I mean, their leaders are, whether you call them smarter or more cunning or whatever, but they're outsmarting us. If you look at Syria and other places, they're outsmarting us. I really think we should not be knocking that country with with all of the money and all of the guts they put into it.
On the show with us this week is the great Chrissy Stroop, an analyst on global affairs, as well as the American exvangelical movement, as well as Christian nationalism and Russia. She's an advocate for religious deconstruction, LGBTQ plus rights, and social justice. During a particularly difficult time in my life, Chrissy went out of her way to defend me from hit pieces in the early years when I dared to point out that Trump was very much aligned with Russia, and for the love of goddess, could someone do something about it? So thank you so much for that, Chrissy Stroop, and welcome to Gaslit Nation.
Well, you're very welcome, Andrea, and thanks so much for having me on Gaslit Nation. And yeah, that's a weird number of things to claim to have expertise in, but as I'm sure we'll get into, I came by it all quite honestly through just a very strange life trajectory.
Yeah, being from Indiana, first and foremost.
Yeah, yeah.
First of all, how are you doing in this hellscape?
Yeah, it's not great, It's well, there's my Uber coming out.
Right. We're vindicated, unfortunately, all those years
Yeah.
ago, because Chrissy and I were part of the CIA funded cabal Illuminati. I'm just kidding. No, those are the accusations people made against us.
Either that or Russian spies.
Yeah,
'cause
we're
that makes
Russian
sense.
spies, depending on who you ask. But we were very early on social media, having backgrounds in researching Soviet history and just obviously seeing the signs of Russia trying to hijack our democracy from within. So we were screaming about this and amplifying each other and other experts and really paying the price for that very early on. And now here we are. So how have you been coping?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unpleasant and uncomfortable to see a lot of things that you were predicting or saying could happen if we didn't get our shit together.
Because we didn't no one got their shit together.
we
The
got
institutions
nothing,
were like,
absolutely.
money, money, money. Let's do
Yeah.
this.
I mean, yeah, we're facing pretty severe institutional failure now. I remember back in the first Trump term, all the institutionalists being like, oh, our checks and balances are going to hold. I'm like, I don't know. I think they're shaking pretty hard. And and now they're just being decimated.
Yeah,
So,
that American exceptionalism will swoop in and save us.
right. In summer of 2019, I moved to Portland, Oregon, just kind of in time to try to get to know the town a little bit before the pandemic hit. So that wasn't great. But I've been out here, so I feel a lot safer here than Indiana or Florida, where I was before. I mean, I've kind of been all over the place, but I have a PhD in modern Russian history from Stanford. I got that in 2012. I taught actually at, of all places, the Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Administration in Moscow for 3 years, 2012 to 2015. And I ended up there because there were no tenure track jobs in my field in the United States, or very, very few. And, I couldn't get one.
And that's also how we got here. Because all of the Russian experts, Ukraine experts were being iced out and there weren't financial opportunities for them to be, ensconced in government at leading think tanks.
After the end of the Cold War, I mean, I think in retrospect, we could possibly revise, whether the Cold War ended in 1991 but there was a lot of defunding of Russian studies and Russian language education that happened. A lot of universities dropped the major because students weren't majoring in it. And meanwhile, you got all these major macroeconomic changes, which are also caused, like universities are turning into corporations, right? They're losing their state funding. They're operating more like businesses. They're paying executives or, administrators, but basically executives, ridiculous amounts of money. And the administration bloats, the faculty lose power, and everything's about...
It's a massive grift now, because what happens...
to make money.
Yes, and what happens to these universities is that they attract these slimy sleazeball executives who just want to go in with their fancy pedigree, having worked at these in Goldman Sachs or whatever, and they want to just cash in, don't care about their legacy, and then cash out.
I mean, I wouldn't call university education a massive grift at this point, but it is definitely not worth what most people would pay for an undergraduate education. And it's definitely getting, it's getting worse in many ways, depending on where you are, because the extent to which a state is like doing Trumpish things or complying with them, or you look at like Florida and Texas, they were in some ways laboratories for what Republicans are trying to do to the entire country now. I mean, in Florida, I would call this like American Gleichschaltung, right? They are making sure all the universities, all the institutions are absolutely in line with the state ideology. That's what obviously the Nazis did when they came to power, right? And they called it Gleichschaltung. That's why I'm using this German word. It means to make everything sort of the same, on the same page.
That's exactly the language that the wrestling executive, McMahon, right, the Secretary of Education, she said, we're just trying to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Oh, yeah. I didn't quite make that connection off the top of my head, but yeah. McMahon is such a funny choice for Secretary of Education. Trump's base is still very much primarily the Christian right, and especially white evangelical Protestant Christians. And sure, a lot of those people get into pro wrestling. Some are too holy for pro wrestling, but some are not. But, Betsy DeVos was kind of more of a typical pick, I think, that you'd see for this, but McMahon is going to do exactly, or trying to do exactly what they want to, which is basically to dismantle public education so that they can control it, right? You want to funnel kids into Christian education through either homeschooling, which is a vehicle, and I'm not, hashtag not all homeschooling, okay? Don't scream at me, don't at me, but homeschooling is a widely used vehicle for radicalization of families and children into the Christian right, of indoctrination of children. And sometimes, like parents start with perfectly good intentions, but who's offering them curricula, who's offering them resources, who's offering them to become a part of a co-op? It's these radical right-wing Christians. And so they kind of get sucked in. So it's a vehicle for that. And then there's Christian schools as well, which through the Supreme Court and, Republican policies over the last couple decades, we're seeing, more and more abilities for those schools to get state funding. And that's still being fought out at the Supreme Court. And if they dismantle public education, they're going to try to direct as many people into those types of education as possible. And I grew up, I'm a Christian educated kid, right? I went to Christian schools, radical evangelical schools, but it's kind of a whole other story.
In Indiana, which I've
Yes.
driven through, and it seems straight out of a Mike Judge film, like giant Jesus crosses on the side of the highway.
Yeah, American Jesus, baby. Indiana, and then for a brief stint in Colorado Springs, which right when it was kind of being turned into like the crazy evangelical center that it is today.
Right, it's sort of like a preparing for the rapture compound of a.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was there from 1993 to 1995 in middle school, in the same kind of Christian school there.
So what was that like? Because the experience you had is now being revved up across this country with the force of the federal government behind it.
Oh, yeah. Since I got back here from Moscow, and I was in Florida then teaching at the University of South Florida, which I was able to do for 3 years on a postdoc and then a visiting instructor thing, but then it didn't last. I kept thinking, the whole country seems to be turning into a Christian school. That is the thought that I had many times when Trump was elected for the first time, with evangelical backing, massive evangelical backing, and then with the kind of policies that he pursued. And I think because a lot of political scientists and also foreign policy analysts, international relations people, they downplay the importance of religion to national politics and also geopolitics. I don't think they always see how influential, this stuff is. I think we're starting to really discuss it now, and we have been for maybe a decade with the term Christian nationalism. But yeah, I mean, growing up in those schools, you say, like, at least through the elementary years, you say 3 pledges a day, not just one. You pledge to the American flag, the Christian flag, and the Bible. And it's very anti-pluralist. So you get the idea immediately that, we are trying to bring this country back around to its Christian roots or whatever. It's a very Christian nationalist project in a typical evangelical school. One of the halls in my elementary school was like emblazoned with this Bible verse, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." And because we were constantly being told that, liberals are evil, they're killing babies, we have to stop abortion. And when you get a little older, also we have to stop these gay people who want special rights. You know what that means? That means that, and sometimes it's spelled out for you. If a country disobeys God, it will be punished. If it does God's will, it will flourish. And so we were trying to change the political system to be in line with God's will, which means you got to overturn Roe v. Wade, you got to ban abortion everywhere, keep the queers at bay. That is how you have a country that will be blessed.
Wow. And if you don't do that, you are basically setting your country up for an eternal damnation.
Yeah. And, if you look at, like, sometimes when disasters happen, certain Christian right leaders say some awful things, and then maybe they try to walk them back a little bit. But, like, if you remember, after 9/11, Jerry Falwell Sr., blamed that on basically homosexuality and abortion and stuff like that. And he got some pushback. He kind of tried to walk it back a little, but not too much. Pat Robertson, very similar. They're both dead now, but their ideas are not dead. And I mean, Pat Robertson's TV network, the Christian Broadcasting Network, still reaches millions of people. It was reaching millions of people before Fox News became a thing, and now Fox News reaches many, many more.
And then Sinclair and One American Network and Epic
Right.
Times And on the list goes. It just keeps multiplying.
But yeah, the evangelical Christians were doing the whole authoritarian post-truth media ecosystem first in their own sort of little niche area, their parallel world. And I grew up in that parallel world.
And now you're a trans woman in Portland, Oregon. So how did you get out?
Yeah, it's a long story. I mean, so I didn't even realize I was queer for a very long time. I've always been very cerebral. I've lived in my head. I've had problems with embodiment, and like spatial reasoning is not my strong suit. I have a terrible sense of direction. And I think it's partly because I was driven to live in my head as a kid, and I was a very verbal kid because I always just felt different and off a little bit, which made me kind of more of an observer than a participant sometimes, even in my own life. And I couldn't put my finger on what that was. And in school, I would get teased for not being like masculine enough or whatever. But I always was attracted to girls. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm just a weird straight guy, right? But also, like, I identified with girls and women, looked to strong women leaders for inspiration, identified with female protagonists in literature. But I didn't know what any of that meant. I think maybe when I was 14 or 15, I had my first understanding of, what a trans person would be. But, I had this idea of the transvestite in my head who is super, super femme and only attracted to men, right? So that was not me. And I had so many other kinds of like existential crises going on because the older I got too, the more doubts I had about this faith and then the politics that were like an integral part of it. And so I actually didn't have my own queer awakening until I was 33 and living in Moscow.
The age of Jesus. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, no, there you go, right? Resurrection time. Sometimes you just need a little distance, and maybe I think, underneath it, my kind of like almost like endless crisis of faith that was so protracted and painful for many years, because I'm like typical eldest child, conscientious, cautious. I didn't know what would happen, if I really openly broke with my family, and I was afraid of that. But I was just afraid to hurt them. At a certain point, I felt like an impossible person who shouldn't exist. And I felt like I didn't know if I was kind of hiding certain things to protect my family or to protect myself. And that went on for years and years. I mean, certainly when I was in grad school, I was feeling that way because I knew I couldn't really believe the things anymore. But I tried to keep going to church. And I actually got confirmed Episcopalian in 2012. So I'm an atheist now, but I guess I'm still Episcopalian on paper because I don't really excommunicate people, and I'm not going to bother them about that. It just doesn't matter that much to me. But, when I got to Moscow to start my teaching job, and the reason I went there was that, so the Stanford and Moscow Study Abroad program used to be held at RNIPA. That's the acronym that we use in English. In Russian, the acronym is RANHIGS, for Российская Академия Народного Хозяйства и Государственной Службы при Президенте Российской Федерации, which I like to say because, well, let's just say this gives people some good understanding of why Soviets and then, Russians love acronyms. Anyway, I'm like, I'm going to go to the Anglican Church, which I'd been to it a couple of times. Right? There's one Anglican church in Moscow, and it's kind of like in that neighborhood where there's a bunch of embassies and consulates, and for that reason, there's no metro station nearby. You have to take like a 20-minute walk to get there. And every Sunday, I'm like, I'm so tired. I'm going to go to church next Sunday. And I keep doing that for several weeks. And then I think around about October at this point of 2012, I'm like, you know what? I don't really want to go to church anymore. And I'm fine with that. Fast forward a little bit, and I start hanging out with more queer people and then start realizing I'm queer myself. And when I have that awakening, like, oh God, I've always actually wanted to be a woman. I don't even really like men that much. # not all, but, I've never really wanted to be a man. This, like, these concepts of masculinity that we have made like sense for me, that they were never a good fit. I mean, they make no sense to me. People are always trying to put me in boxes that don't work for me. Certainly in dating, for example, that happened so many times. And at that moment, I was still, I didn't believe in hell. At that point, I hadn't believed in hell for like 15, 16, 17 years.
Well, we're living it, Chrissy.
Well, yeah.
So
like
believe your eyes, believe your ears, but go on.
But the thing is, hell is like eternal conscious torment on another plane. I'd stopped believing in it, but I was still afraid of it. Sometimes the fear was like less, but it would come back, this visceral fear, because that fear was just drilled into me as a kid, as a teeny tiny kid. I mean, from like the cradle. But as soon as I realized I was queer, like that fear of hell just disappeared. So obviously these things were all interconnected. And when you are a trans person, and you don't see it yourself, I mean, a lot of trans people don't have the typical, oh, I just always knew from my earliest childhood that I wanted to not be the gender that I was assigned at birth. When you don't have that typical story, you sometimes have this period that people refer to as egging, right? Like you're like an egg and then you're going to hatch as the baby trans. So that's my weird egging story.
And that all happened in Russia?
Yeah. I had some interesting friends in Moscow, and I also knew a lot of people who turned out to disappoint me. But I have a long history of going to Russia. It's weird because I've spent far and away the longest periods of my life have been spent in the United States, of course, by a long shot, but Russia and the United States are the two countries where I've spent like significant chunks of my adult life. And they have both profoundly disappointed me. And, I started studying those intersections between nationalists, Putinist Russians, and right-wing Americans, and then also the European right. And I started publishing stuff on that. The first piece I published was a much narrower piece, just about one event. This kind of fake sociologist, anti-LGBTQ sociologist, Paul Cameron, going to Moscow and addressing the Kremlin in 2013. Obviously, this is when Putin was taking that far right-wing populist turn and passing the anti-gay propaganda law and all that stuff. I was there for that. And so using this American scientist, quote unquote, right, to give them an imprimatur of legitimacy. That was still happening back then, that kind of stuff. And then it led me to this whole bigger puzzle that I started unpacking.
Right. The marriage between the American far right and rising Russian totalitarianism joining forces together to undermine democracies worldwide. And you're right, it was Putin's anti-gay laws in 2013 that were a pivotal moment in the fascist global war against democracy. And guess what happened when Madonna and so many superstars around the world started boycotting Russia in response to Putin's anti-gay laws? Guess who ignored that global boycott and threw one of his pageants in Moscow? And that was, of course, Trump. In 2013, Trump was like, I'll be your friend, Russia, because I've got your back, because I know you have mine, because all my businesses depend on you, and you,
right,
all you Russians buy my
him after all his failed casinos by that point.
Exactly. So Trump standing by Russia's side in 2013 with his Miss Universe pageant in Moscow, and that's also where Christopher Steele, who used to run the Russia desk for British intelligence, where he believes that the Russians collected dirt on him, right? Like he was having some golden shower party in the Moscow hotel.
I mean, the
work-in theory of all of us internet weirdos. But yeah, so Christopher Steele basically in his Steele report was like, yeah, something happened when Trump was over there for Miss Universe. And
I honestly have a hard time imagining Trump enjoying golden showers, though. He's such a germaphobe.
Yeah. There's something. It is probably like underage.
Oh, that's probably it. I mean, we all know Trump was buddy with Epstein, and
yeah, like really close, like really spending a lot of time together. And so 2013, that was that big turning point. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine happened a year later. And then Russia brings Trump to power illegally in 2016. So really 2013 was the year that the war kicks off globally.
Yep. And I was there, I stayed there until the end of the 2014-2015 academic year when I got a job at the University of South Florida in Tampa. And it was it was a very weird time.
So you witnessed Russia basically stabbing itself in the face repeatedly, right? With the anti-gay laws and then the violence that they were fueling behind the scenes with Yanukovych, right? There's like Russian special forces there. In Yanukovych's fiery sniper-filled war against protesters. And then Russia, in reaction to that, seizes Crimea and then invades Donbass in the east And then the sanctions start hitting.
The counter sanctions, which, you know, I wasn't the first to frame it this way, but basically Russia sanctioning itself.
Yeah.
You know, I and like lots of people in Moscow, lots of Muscovites were like, man, our stores are running out of the good French cheese. Russian cheese sucks. You know, like I went to Spain for a while when that was happening and came back, and I brought some manchego and, you know, some good Spanish cheeses, and people were so happy.
You could have made a lot of money.
But that wasn't about that. I mean, I guess I could.
And that's why you're in academia. Just kidding.
Right? No, for real though. I definitely could have used it because all of these horrible things that Russia was doing and that happened, they severely devalued my ruble-denominated salary. That was bad because I was trying to pay off debt in dollars that I had.
What was the attitude of everyday Russians around you towards what was going on? Were they just like, we're going to get the hell out?
There are a lot of people in Moscow who were like opposed. But again, I knew a lot of people who I was surprised that they were just happily going along with it. And I mean, including some really shitty American expats who are just going to follow the Russian nationalist line, and the kind of people who would like work for RT or something, or maybe they weren't even smart enough to work for RT, but there were some shitty people. So I don't know. I think your average Russian, and you know, I haven't looked back at public polling data, which is also always iffy from Russia. A lot of people were very in the Kremnosh camp, just
the Crimea is ours.
Yeah, just going along with it. And I knew some people who, of course, who weren't. A lot of people in the university now, a lot of the scholars in the university, the professors, some of them wanted to get out. So it's using this framework, this social science framework that I won't go deeply into of post-secularism, but basically the idea that like there's this resurgent religion in the world, right? Challenging the secularization thesis, the kind of classic idea that with modernity, people get more secular, less religious. Religion loses social significance is how sociologists put that. Well, obviously, religion currently has a lot of social significance. So what the project actually did was trace these networks around Russia, Moscow, the Russian Orthodox Church to global conservatism. It was mapping that and publishing a lot of research related to that. Dmitry Uzlaner, who is a sociologist, was a part of that. Some other really interesting Russians were a part of that and got to spend some time in Central or Western Europe as a result. I've lost track of a lot of my colleagues from back then, but yeah, I mean, they are not your average Russian on the street. And of course, I mean, in these low trust authoritarian societies, you're going to have most people, at least officially, go along with the regime. You go along to get along. You don't want to be that tallest blade of grass that gets cut down first.
Right, exactly. Like the Nazis and Secretary of Education McMahon have said, everyone needs to be on the same page.
Yeah, and that's certainly Putin's view of the world as well. And in Russia for many years now, people have been able to get arrested for like liking the wrong thing on social media, you know, or for saying on social media that Crimea is Ukraine.
Or sending $50 to Razum for Ukraine, which landed one Russian woman in prison. And she was recently released or on her way to being released in a prisoner swap with Russia.
We're going to see this now in the United States when people are being, and right now they're targeting immigrants, but it won't be only immigrants or children of immigrants forever. You say the wrong thing in a university op-ed, you say not that like, hey, Hamas is great and Israel is terrible. You say Israel is doing a bad thing and Palestinians should have civil rights. And you're a Turkish student on a student visa and they arrest you.
Right. And they're definitely trying to Christian nationalize the universities.
Yeah, and K through 12 schools. And again, that has also been a state-by-state patchwork thing for quite some time now. But what I failed to say earlier when talking about education is, yeah, to the extent that they cannot funnel everyone into explicitly Christian education, they're going to try to Christianize the public education that's left, which will also be as bad as they can make it because they don't think it should exist.
Well, the Supreme Court surprisingly struck down a really key case for that. So that's good news.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Well, that was Amy Coney Barrett, actually, who was the swing vote on that. And the far right has their Brooks Brothers khaki pants and their tiki torches out for her.
Yeah, no, it's really funny. She has surprised me a couple times now, in as much as she really does seem to be dedicated to trying to interpret the law and the Constitution as best she can. And I didn't think she would be like that, which means that even though most of her decisions are going to still go right wing, there are some places she just can't go because it's so obviously unconstitutional, and she actually turns out to be a conscientious legal interpreter. I didn't see that coming.
And that's what they get for shoving her through. So, but yeah, I mean, that's their worst nightmare, right? The reason why they've had to hijack our democracy, like stripping us of our voting rights, like ushering in Citizens United and gutting the VRA, is because too many of their own have been unreliable when it counted. Like Mike Pence.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's not a hero, okay? You do not,
Of
under any
course not.
circumstances, got to hand it to Mike Pence from my home state of Indiana. Who single-handedly caused like an AIDS outbreak there by ending needle exchange programs. Yeah, he did. He at least would not go along with overturning the 2020 election results. I do credit him for that. That's a low bar, but he met it. It should be a low bar.
Not violently overthrowing our democracy. Here's an award. Like, that's where we are, America. So I want to ask you, like, all those years growing up in Christian nationalist school in Indiana and then Colorado Springs, what gave you hope? Like, what was your lifeline to connect yourself to yourself?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I mean, so when I was really young and elementary and maybe getting into middle school, and you just believe everything your parents say, I wasn't plagued with doubt at that time. And we had a pretty comfortable middle class life after the earliest years of my childhood. But as I said, I did just feel kind of out of sync a lot of the time. So what I did was I read. I just read a lot.
But they're banning books.
Oh, yeah, no, that's bad.
But what kind of books were you reading that were waking you up to
here's
yourself?
the really funny thing. My mom is a Christian school teacher. She's a teacher's aide now, about to retire. My dad is a music pastor. They've both actually moved really far, for where they came from. So we still have a pretty good relationship. They are now kind of isolated from the social community that I grew up in because, they got their COVID vaccines and boosters, and they didn't vote for Trump. They actually voted for Harris, which is it's wild to me because in 2016 I couldn't convince my mom to vote for Hillary Clinton. She didn't vote for Trump either, but she's like, but she's not a Christian. And I'm like, yes, she is. She's a practicing Methodist. And mom was just like, I just don't believe it. But
she's a mouthy woman with devil horns coming out of her.
She said it takes a village when everyone knows God wants the parents to have 100% of all the rights over their children to do whatever they want.
Right. So my friend who works on the front lines of the climate crisis was saying how difficult it is for her to talk to her Christian nationalist mother because her mother was like, do you really believe in the climate crisis? Jesus is going to take care of it all.
Yeah, I heard some of that, growing up when we were sort of just first talking about global warming or the ozone hole and that sort of thing. I would often get that dismissive response from adults. And this is actually something that I came to have some concern about, even from the age of 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there, because my grandma on my mom's side, who was actually very moderate and always a peacemaker. And when I got older and I was arguing with my relatives, she would try to shut that down. But, then once she pulled me aside and told me she didn't support blanket abortion bans, and she voted for Obama. And I was like, wow. So she got me a subscription to Ranger Rick magazine and renewed it for many years as a Christian.
And it radicalized you, Ranger Rick did.
Sort of. I mean, it planted seeds, right? Ranger Rick is published by, I think, the National Wildlife Organization, right? Something like that. And it's got a lot of information that's pro-environment. And that stuff I ate up, and I was willing to define myself as an environmentalist and then start getting on people in my family when they didn't turn out the lights when they left the room, or being like, why don't we recycle, Mom and Dad? Why don't we recycle?
So environmental stewardship is sort of like a reasonable entry point to help draw people towards the light.
And you can easily, there's a lot of things you can easily argue from the Bible, including many authoritarian and bad things. But yeah, you can argue from the Bible that stewardship, right? God wants us to be good stewards of this world. Even if, let's say, it is going to end soon, we're still supposed to take care of it. So you could try to make that argument without officially rocking the boat of the Christian ideology, even though most of the Christians around you didn't, and it made you weird. But there was also, of course, a lot of information about evolution in there. But I would always just tell myself at the time, like, oh, but we don't believe that millions of years apart. But wow, what an interesting story about dinosaurs. Or
Yeah, how do evangelicals make sense of dinosaurs?
Oh, God, so many ways that, I mean, they're completely absurd, but there's some very funny theories and approaches to that. So I think kind of the most common one when I was growing up in our milieu was that dinosaurs, they were basically just overgrown reptiles because you see, back before Noah's flood, when there was a firmament over the earth that protected people from UV rays and whatever, and people lived to be like 900 years old, but you know how they describe those people in the book of Genesis? You know, reptiles just grow to their environment. If they're going to live for 900 years, obviously they'll be huge.
Oh my God.
Right. So, but some people believe that like there was a first creation that for some reason God destroyed before ours, and the dinosaur bones are left over from that time, but they weren't actually part of this creation at all. That's called the gap theory. Some people think that Satan just put the dinosaur bones in the earth to trick people. I think it's all out there. There is this totally debunked, but you know, for a while there was buzz about they had in the I think Paluxy River in Texas found human footprints and dinosaur footprints in the same rock layer, proving that they lived together. So that was a thing that went around. Yeah.
So internet hoaxes. How
Before the
many?
internet.
Oh, really? So how many people would you say across the country are being indoctrinated into this?
That is really hard to say, and I tried to estimate it a few years back using data that was gathered by the then HuffPo religion reporter, Rebecca Klein, who did this really thorough study on Christian schools receiving voucher funding. And I think at any given time, it's got to be in the hundreds of thousands, just based on the number of schools, probably low hundreds of thousands would be a conservative estimate. But I think she found about 2,500 schools, like evangelical Christian schools, that use certain curricula, because that was what they searched for. Who's using these particular, you know, the most popular young earth creationist, right-wing evangelical Christian nationalist curricula, and those would be Bob Jones, ACE, which stands for Accelerated Christian Education, and ABECA, which comes out of Pensacola, Florida, of course, Florida. But anyway, this is going to be a low number, right? If you look at schools who are using some of those curricula or those books, textbooks, you look at schools, the overlap of the schools that are using those curricula and the schools that receive voucher funding. And obviously there's going to be schools that are also indoctrinating children this way that fall outside of that. So it's impossible to say for sure. We just don't have the numbers. And that's also because even with a semi-functional Department of Education at the federal level, American education is so decentralized and such a messy patchwork. And it is evangelicals and other right-wing conservatives, authoritarians, people who they resist any kind of government imposition of any kind of standard curricula because they don't want their kids learning evolution. They don't want their kids learning normal, comprehensive sex ed. They want to control everything, all the information that their kids are exposed to.
And they don't want their children learning basic human rights.
Of course not, because human rights is a secular concept, although our modern concept of human rights was actually developed largely by like Jacques Maritain, a French Catholic philosopher, neo-Thomist, although that kind of has its own potential pitfalls there, because there are Catholics, including like authoritarian Catholic integralists, who argue that human rights isn't supposed to extend to people who want to use it for things that do not contribute to human flourishing. Like the Catholic line is, we support human dignity. Read the fine print. Human dignity means that you are not gay, you are not trans. That obviously, if you're those things, you're doing your human dignity wrong, and we don't support you.
Welcome to the Gaslit Nation Action Guide, updated for 2025. That's Project 2025. All the resources mentioned can be found at gaslitnationpod.com. Just look for our action guide at the top of the main menu. Donald Trump is not the cause of America's fascism crisis. He's a symptom. Trump reflects a deeper disease of corruption, institutional failure, and widespread indifference. We can no longer afford to look away. We're in a moment that calls not just for outrage, but for action. Democracy isn't a guarantee. Democracy is a lifestyle. It's how we live, it's how we show up, and how we care for each other. Below is a living list of ways to take care of yourself, protect the vulnerable, and help defend what's left to build a new democracy for all. Guides for the road ahead. Read for courage and clarity. Stride Toward Freedom by Martin Luther King Jr. is more than a memoir. It's a blueprint for organizing under fascism. MLK was called radical in his time for simply demanding dignity and human rights. Remember, it's not radical to want clean air, fair wages, and freedom from fear and poverty. Mantras and mindsets. When you're afraid, repeat love. That one simple, powerful word, love. Use it like armor in tense public spaces or difficult conversations. Just repeat that word love in your head like a mantra to help you stay grounded in any tense situations. Have faith in your higher power, in your inner light, in each other. You are not alone. Ideas like democracy cannot be killed. Stay human. Anger is natural, but unity is essential. Save the venting for trusted spaces. Focus on protecting and connecting. Protect yourself and others. Know your rights. The ACLU has a comprehensive guide. Check in on vulnerable people. A text message can be a lifeline. Know how to act if ICE is in your area. Learn from Teen Vogue's guide and start a neighborhood watch. Trans rights are human rights. The Human Rights Campaign has a guide on how to support trans people. Read it. Abortion is healthcare. Support Planned Parenthood. Practice bystander intervention. Learn the 5 Ds from right to be. Know how to de-escalate. And, if you need to, record safely. Beware of surveillance. Phones, apps, smart devices, they're listening. For sensitive communication, go analog. Check out the Gaslight Nation Security Committee presentation on surveillance, self-defense. Build community power. Join a mutual aid network. Local solidarity saves lives and serves as an early warning system. Check out Global Giving's guide on mutual aid. Support unions. Start one or join one. Organizing your workplace is the front line of our democracy. Listen to Gaslit Nation's interview with union organizer Jasmine Lely on how to start a union. Vote in local elections. State governments are our most direct path to resistance and reform. Get involved with organizations like Run for Something, States Project, and Sister District. Launch or support ballot initiatives for democracy, like Katie Fahey did in Michigan, where she took on gerrymandering and won. Small actions make big impacts. Organize for the long haul. Smash the oligarchy, not each other. Work with groups like the Working Families Party to create people-powered alternatives. Fight the climate crisis. George Washington University provides a guide on realistic ways you can combat climate change today. Practice food and product safety. Reduce meat, grow what you can, and stay informed with sites like Food Safety News. Use important apps like Yuka and Clearia. Good Housekeeping has a comprehensive guide on strong water filters for your home. Create art. Art tells the truth. Culture moves people before policy does. Be prepared. Pack a go bag. Make sure it has IDs, meds, water, masks, protein bars, chargers. Get your documents in order. Passports, legal papers, and clean records. Have a lawyer you trust on speed dial. Keep a journal. Record what's happening. Believe your eyes and ears. Buy physical books. Preserve history and ideas. Don't rely on tech platforms alone. Have a safety plan. Know where you can go across town, state lines, or abroad if you need to. Care for your mind. Protect your mental hygiene. Block grifters and defeatists. Build a circle of resilience. Know your history. Read widely. Learn how we got here and how others fought back before us. Listen to the Gaslit Nation special, How We Got Here. It took 40 years for the far right to hijack our democracy. We must plant seeds of change today, together. Raise the next generation with hope. Shield young kids from the chaos as best you can. Empower older ones to believe in the power of their voice. No one is coming to save us. Change isn't about one politician. It's about systems, values, and who we choose to be in the face of rising fascism. There's no single solution, but there's strength in numbers, in organizing, and in love. Whether you live in a Republican hostage red state or blue state, these resources are for you. Don't take your rights for granted. Practice democracy every day, including staying informed. And if you're not American and you live abroad, the Trump virus can happen anywhere. No democracy is exceptional. Be vigilant and protect your community. That's how we win. A better world is possible. Bookmark the Gaslit Nation Action Guide at gaslitnationpod.com. Thank you for staying with us in the fight.
Su mano tocó y el niño empezó a mover. Hijo mío, cálmate, de pronto vas a nacer. Amar, ¿dónde voy? Siento frío, miedo. Esta noche cruzaremos y de pronto vas a saber. Porque yo le pedí a la Virgen que llegue con bien un hogar que dejé, una vida que no te daré. ¡Ay, Dios! ¡Sí! Que se abra por las calles de San Francisco, de Rincón, Guanajuato. Y a mi gente la más valiente se las canto a todos ustedes.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up at the Truth Teller level or higher on Patreon. Discounted annual memberships are available, and you can also give the gift of membership. All summer long, Gaslit Nation, created with love and anger, has been presenting a special series featuring leading experts on how to smash the patriarchy and the oligarchy to make the world safer for everyone. Trump didn't happen overnight. Let's plant seeds of hope together. For the hottest of hot takes, join the conversation at the Gaslit Nation salons every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. I'll be there with our global community of listeners. Come for deep dives into the news, learn from fellow listeners, and share what's happening in your corner of the world. Can't make it live? Recordings of our Monday salons are available on Patreon, along with our monthly Gaslit Nation book club. Access the salons, bonus shows, ad-free episodes, and more at patreon.com/gaslit. That's patreon.com/gaslit. Thank you to everyone who supports the show. To help Ukraine with urgently needed humanitarian aid, join me in donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. To support refugees in conflict zones, donate to Doctors Without Borders at doctorswithoutborders.org. And to protect critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Andrea Chalupa. Our editing wizard is Nicholas Torres. And our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And don't forget to check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. Original music in Gaslit Nation is composed by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle. Our logo design was generously donated to us by Hamish Smythe of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher: Todd, Dan, Milo, and Cubby, Ruth Ann Harnish, Abby Zavos, Lily Wachowski, Ice Bear is Defiant, Sherry Escobar, Sydney Davies, Work for Better, Prep for Trouble, that's right, John Schoenthaler, Ellen McGirt, Larry Gasson, Ann Bertino, David East, Mark, Sean Berg, Kristen Custer, Kevin Gannon, Sandra Collins, Katie Masuris, James D. Leonard, Leo Chalupa, Carol Golstad, Marcus J. Trent, Joe Darcy, D.L. Singfield, Nicole Spear, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, Mark, Diana Gallagher, Leah Campbell, Jared Lombardo, Randall Brewer, and Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all so much for your support of the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.